Percy and the Abominable Snowman. It was winter on Sodor, and the first snowfall of the year had covered Thomas's branch line. The engines were in the shed, getting steamed up for the day. Their crews were huddled around an oil drum fire next to the steps of Thomas's cab. They were all talking about a program they watched last night about a strange creature, the Abominable Snowman, who is said to live far away, somewhere in the hills. No one was quite sure what it looked like, except it was large and white as snow. The presenter of the program had said whoever got the first photograph of the Abominable Snowman would be famous and rich. Percy looked over at Toby. "You don't suppose a thing like that exists, do you?" he asked. Toby pondered. "I don't know," he said at last. "It could do. I mean, we've all seen stranger things in our time." Thomas scoffed. "Percy, you'll believe anything. There's no such thing as the Abominable Snowman." Bruno, the sentinel engine, was about to interject, but Percy spoke first. "Oh, really?" he smirked. "This is coming from an engine who thought I was a ghost." Thomas was taken aback. I was only pretending to be scared," he retorted lamely. "I knew it was you, really." Just then his crew climbed into his cab. "Come on, Thomas," said his driver. "It's time to start work." Thomas hastily puffed away. "Thomas shouldn't really be rude to you like that," Bruno piped up. Percy chuckled. "He was only teasing," he said. "It's something we've always had a habit of doing." "Yes," added Toby. "Believe me, Bruno, once you've been around them for a while longer, you'll understand a bit better." Bruno thought for a moment, and decided to take Toby's word for it. Near the junction, the line had a gradient. It was gentle on one side, but rather steep on the other. The steep side had a set of emergency points with a siding at the foot, and in winter, a large mound of snow is shovelled behind the set of buffers. They used the snow as a double buffer zone. That morning, Percy was bringing stone to the harbour. When he arrived, he saw a long train of trucks waiting to be taken away. "These are supplies for the villages in the valley along the branch," the foreman explained. "They need to be delivered soon. We're expecting another heavy snowfall soon." Percy looked on the horizon, and sure enough, dark clouds of snow were beginning to form. Percy's driver looked doubtful. "I don't know if we could take all these at once," he said. "They do look rather heavy, and Percy might not be able to manage on his own." "Of course I can," Percy huffed. "I've handled those longer than this, and we can't let everyone else down." The driver looked sceptical, but decided it was best to avoid a dispute and agree. Soon, Percy was coupled to the trucks, and when all was ready, they set off. His driver was right. The trucks were heavy, and he had to work harder to get them moving. But at last they were away. Here we go, he puffed as they started up the gradient. Then it happened. As they started down the other side, Percy began to pick up speed. His driver applied the brake to slow them down, but Percy's train was too heavy for them to regain control. "Oh no!" Percy cried, and he slid down the gradient. Fortunately, the emergency points automatically set, and Percy slid into the siding, thumped through the buffers, and ploughed into the large bank of snow. His crew, unhurt, clambered out of the cab and walked to Percy's buried front. "Oh, you foolish engine," sighed the driver. "I told you you might not have managed on your own." "I thought I could manage it," Percy replied in a muffled voice. The fireman looked up. "Best we go and find shelter for now," he said. "The snow's starting to fall." Fortunately, there was a workman's hut nearby, so they and the god went to take shelter, leaving Percy alone. The snow fell and fell, and soon it was starting to engulf Percy. "Oh, brother!" he shivered as he disappeared under. Meanwhile, Thomas was making his way to the junction. He was making heavy work of his train, and he was still brooding over the morning's conversation. "Abominable snowman," he muttered to himself. "Puh! There's no such thing. Why, if there is, I'll—" He stopped mid-sentence. He thought he could hear a strange moaning sound through the wind. It went. Thomas rounded the bend and saw something that made him goggle in horror. A large mound of snow was staring right at him. "No!" he stammered. It can't be. It's the Abominable Snowman!" In a panic, he picked up speed and shot off like a bullet. The station master at the junction was on the platform when Thomas came screaming in. He was going so quickly he almost overshot the platform. It made the station master jump in surprise. He regained his composure and went to speak to Thomas's driver. "What on earth are you playing at?" he demanded. "You know it's dangerous to travel at this speed in this weather." "Sorry," said the driver, "but Thomas seems to have been spooked." He went round to speak to Thomas. "What's the matter with you?" he asked. "You're white as a sheet." I saw it," Thomas stammered. "Saw what?" the driver asked. But before Thomas could answer, a porter came up and whispered something to the driver. The driver was puzzled at first, but then it dawned on him, and smiled. "Come on," he said at last. "Where are we going?" Thomas asked. "Oh, nowhere," the driver smirked. "Just to go see the Abominable Snowman for ourselves." Poor Thomas was aghast. You can't be serious!" he exclaimed. "Perfectly serious," said the driver. "Now come along." Thomas trundled slowly back up the line, and soon pulled up right beside the Abominable Snowman. It stared at him, its eyes looking pained. Thomas gulped. "Now," said the driver, "where's that bucket?" "What are you doing?" asked Thomas anxiously, as the driver took some hot water from his boiler. "Oh, just giving the poor thing a hot drink. It'll catch a cold in this weather," the driver replied. He climbed up to the top of the Abominable Snowman's head, with the bucket of hot water in his hand. Then, without warning, poured the bucket over the head. The Abominable Snowman let out a muffled yell, and then some of the snow came away, revealing a familiar face. "Ow!" it spluttered. "That really hurt!" Thomas's driver looked at Thomas. "Well, there's your Abominable Snowman," he laughed. "It's Percy buried under all this snow." He then clambered down. "Really sorry about that, Percy," he apologized. Percy looked rather pained. Thomas just stood there and stared. Soon, Toby arrived with some workmen, and when Percy's crew rejoined them, they all set to work freeing Percy from his snowy prison. Once his fire was relit, he felt much better. "Thank you," he sighed. "That didn't feel rather pleasant." He then looked at Thomas. "What's wrong with you?" he asked. There was a bit of a silence. Then Thomas said slowly, You made me scared, with all that moaning you were doing." "Moaning?" Percy quizzed. Don't know what you're talking about. Don't know what I'm talking about, Thomas started. But then he stopped. He couldn't think of what to say. I think, said Toby at last, I think we can all agree that the Abominable Snowman is an old cock and bull story. You can say that again, said Percy. You can certainly say that again. And with that, the three engines set off for home.